Hi class, today we are working on lesson 119 in our Saxon book 4. Today's lesson is adding and subtracting fractions with different denominators. So, let's get started. Our first example is a recipe calls for 1/4 of a cup of whole milk and 3/8 of a cup of skim milk. What amount of milk does the recipe call for all together? So all together is our key word that we're adding here. But here's where we need to talk about fractions and common denominators. So remember, if I ask you what 1 apple plus 3 apples are, we get 4 apples. But if I ask you what's 1 apple and 3 bananas, we have 1 apple and 3 bananas. I don't know. We can't combine them, right? We have to turn apples and bananas into what they have in common, which would be fruit. 1 apple and 3 bananas gives us 4 pieces of fruit. So fractions don't work exactly like that because when we turn it into something they have in common, we may end up with more than 1/4. We may end up with more than 3/8. But in this case, if we're gonna add different denominators, we can't do it until we find their common denominator. We have to turn them into the same thing to be able to add them together. So, looking at 4ths and 8ths, what number do they have in common?
Well, they're both even.
They are both even, but I'm going to look at multiples and see if I can find a multiple of 4 and 8 that is the same. So let's count by 4s. 4.
8.
Aye, what do they have in common?
When you count by 4s, you get to 8 too.
Yeah, they have 8 in common. So I can turn 1/4 into some number of 8s. What do I have to multiply times 4 to get 8?
2.
2. 4 times 2 is 8. So whatever I do to the bottom,
Have to do to the top.
I have to do to the top.
2/8.
So 1/4 is the same thing as 2/8. Now I don't have to change this one at all because it's already 8ths. So what is 2/8 plus 3/8?
5/8.
Boom. Done. Okay? We're going to need 5/8 of a cup of milk because that was a word problem. Okay, next problem. Chuck looked at the clock and saw that the lunch bell would ring in 5/6 of an hour. Chuck looked at the clock again 1/2 hour later. At that time, what fraction of an hour remained until the lunch bell rang? God bless you.
Thank you.
Is there a key word in there that tells you whether we're adding or subtracting?
It sounds like we're adding.
Well, listen carefully. Chuck looked at the clock and saw that the lunch bell would ring in 5/6 of an hour. Then he looked again 1/2 an hour later. What fraction of an hour remained until the lunch bell rang? What's our key word? Remained. That tells me, hey, it's what's left over. We're subtracting here. So we need 5/6 minus 1/2. Are they the same thing? 6 and halves? No, I can't take half away from 6. So I have to turn them into common denominators. So always start with your small number and count. 2, 4, 6. Hey, I can turn 1/2 into 6ths. So how many 6ths would be equal to 1/2?
3.
3/6. And so then I don't have to change this one at all. I have 5/6 minus 3/6. So what do I have left? 2/6 would be my answer. Can I reduce this fraction?
Mm-hmm.
I can, because they're both even numbers.
A third.
So we call that simplifying the fraction. 2/6 is equal to 1/3, and this would be my final answer. Okay? All right, we have some practice problems for you here. So, couple addition, couple subtraction. We'll start with 1/2 plus 2/6. Then we'll do 1/3 plus 1/9. Then we'll do 1/8 plus 1/2. Then here's where we start subtraction. 3/8 minus 1/4. Two-thirds minus 2/9. And F, we have 7/8 minus 1/2. Here's where you can pause the video, give these a shot on your own, and when you hit play again, we'll go over the answers together. Okay, so halves and sixths. What do I have to change them to, Nyla?
That would be six.
I have to change the half to the sixth. So how many halves? Oh, I was gonna write a 3 down there. I didn't mean that. How many halves is equal to? How many sixths is equal to 1/2?
3.
3/6. So now 3/6 and 2/6 gives me 5/6. Hard to say that word, sixths, with the X and the TH. All right, thirds and ninths. What do I need to do?
Turn the thirds into ninths.
I have to turn the thirds into ninths. So how many ninths would be equal to 1/3?
That would be 3/9.
3/9. 3/9 and 1/9 gives me 4/9. Okay, over here, 1/8 and 1/2. What's their common denominator?
The half has to be turned into 8.
The half has to be turned into eighths. How many eighths?
4.
4/8 equals a half. 1/8 and 4/8 gives me 5/8 as an answer. Okay? Here, eighths and fourths. What would their common denominator be?
The single fourth has to be turned into the 8.
Again, we need to turn the fourths into eighths. So
2/8.
2/8 would be 1/4. We multiplied times 2, so we do the same thing on the top. 3/8 minus 2/8 just gives us 1/8. Okay? Thirds and ninths, Nyla?
Turn the thirds into ninths.
Turn the thirds into ninths. So it was 2/3,
Which means we have 6 ninths.
which means we have 6/9. So 6 minus 2 gives me 4/9. And finally, eighths and halves.
The halves have to be turned into 8s.
How many eighths?
4.
4/8. 7 minus 4 is 3. So we have 3/8 as our answer. That is the end of this lesson. If you are my student, now is the time to do your written practice, which begins on page 748 of your textbook. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you again soon.